Hi, and welcome to Say Grace, Food for Thought and Hospitality. I'm Steve Palmer, and I invite you to join me as we explore the stories behind leaders in the hospitality industry and beyond. Say Grace is your place to reflect, connect, and savor thoughtful narratives. Everyone has a seat at our table, so pull up a chair and let's discover the transformative power of hospitality together. I'm joined today by Indigo Road longtime hot teammates in the place where it all started, Oak Steakhouse. Having been in business in 20 years, since 2005, this is where the Indigo Road found its birth and where we grew across the Southeast with all these amazing, amazing people. Our guests today are Vonda Freeman, Kimball Brienza, Jennifer Dailey, and Chef Jeremiah Bacon. They've all been with us since the Indigo Road was founded in 2009 and have been an integral part of our story and growth. Vonda Freeman looks after all Indigo Road wine programming, beer crafting, cocktailing, all things alcohol. And it's just such a light of integrity, focus, and passion. A sommelier certified through the prestigious Court of Master Sommelier. Prior to joining the Indigo Road, Vonda spent 8 years in the beverage distribution industry, enjoying a position at South African wine importer Vinovative Imports. Her background has been a tremendous advantage to Indigo Road restaurants and lodging concepts, and her influence is felt throughout all of the company's menu planning, creation, event conception, and coordination, and staff wine education. We love Vonda. Kimball Brienza began his hospitality journey with Indigo Road as a waiter at Oak Steakhouse. And after receiving a culinary degree in 2000 from AOC Technical and Career Education School in upstate New York, today he is a partner at Oku, our Japanese concept with multiple locations. He looks after the operations, and he's really the heart and soul of the Oku brand. Is loved by many, and we are so happy to have him. Welcome, Kimball. As well as being a 2024 James Beard semifinalist for Outstanding Restaurateur. Our controller, Jennifer Dailey, is a native of South Carolina from Spartanburg, or better known as Cowpens. Before joining the Indigo Road in 2009, she worked at Ginn Hotel and Resorts and spent 9 years in hotel accounting. Today, she oversees the financial statements for over 30 concepts, the home office, our hotels, our restaurants, otherwise known as Mama Bear. Welcome, Jennifer. And last but not least, our Charleston native, Jeremiah Bacon. After attending the Culinary Institute in Hyde Park, Jeremiah worked at such legendary restaurants as River Cafe, La Bernardin, and Per Se. Jeremiah then returned home and became the executive chef of Oak Steakhouse. He then became the chef and partner at McIntosh, where he received James Beard recognition 5 times for Best Chef Southeast. And today he serves as the executive chef for the Indigo Road Hospitality Group. Welcome, Jeremiah. Your influence, and you're just the most respected chef in the company and looked to for many for guidance, and we love having you as well. Welcome, guys. How are you?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thrilled to be here.
Good. Yes, so good.
Jennifer's like, can we hurry up and get this over with?
I think I need to work on my bio.
Okay.
Yeah, he worked on his like last night. and
That's
sent it-
nice.
Yeah.
Well, I
And
updated
The
it.
fact that he
sounded
worked
really
on it
good.
at
I know,
all, I think
sounds
it
good.
is.
It sounds good. Yeah.
I don't think mine was updated. I did ask.
Yeah. Mine is a little dated. Anyway.
So this is my family, and none of what happens today with 35 restaurants and 6 hotels happens without these guys. So thanks for being on Say Grace.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, food for thought and hospitality. And so we'll dive in. Kimball, did you ever in a million years think when you started at Oak Steakhouse that you would be a partner in 10 restaurants?
I had no clue.
what was ahead? I was just trying to keep my head above water and stay out of trouble. But I mean,
which you've done with varying degrees of success.
Yeah,
by the way.
and it's been a journey, as you know, and you've helped coach me along the way, professionally, personally. So, I honestly, I had no clue. I literally was just enjoying life, and it didn't, it struck me. I think when I finally got to Oku, which I give you so many thanks for putting me in that role in the early days. I didn't really know what was ahead. I think. I was actually thinking about this today. I always appreciate, I think, you trusting me and seeing something in me that I didn't even know was in myself, So, yeah, I had no idea we'd be here today, but man, it's been a hell of a ride, and I'm enjoying it still. So
very cool.
Yeah.
What drew you to hospitality?
It's funny. I tell this story. It was early on in my young teens, the first job I ever had. I was a dishwasher, and I remember. It was just a job, and I was like, okay, I can do this. I can get paid. And I remember it was a big night, whether it was New Year's Eve or something, but I remember washing dishes, not enjoying that part. But I remember the door swinging open and seeing the waiters coming back and hearing the commotion in the bar. And it sounded like a fun party out there. I was like 14. And I just remember at that moment, I was like, I want to be part of what's going on out there. And so, just the journey of me in hospitality was getting out, being a busboy, a waiter. And it just, from there, it snowballed. And I don't think I ever looked back. And I don't think there's a career that I would have enjoyed or excelled in other than that. But it happened at a young age. I mean, I was definitely drawn to, just the excitement and just the craziness, I guess. I don't think I fit anywhere else, really. So,
Vonda, how about you? You started as a bartender. So, fun fact, before I ever knew Vonda, I wandered into a bar called the Windjammer in South Carolina at noon. It was the early 90s. And we were lining up to do shots. It was Sunday, of course. I'd never met Vonda, but she saw me and my group of rabble-rousers and walked to the other end of the bar and said, I'm not serving them. You better. And so somebody else had to wait on us. That's how I met Vonda.
But and he still hired me.
And I still hired me later. I still hired you.
Yeah.
Why wine?
Well, I mean, I think I had been in the restaurant industry, and I think sometimes we just we end up in that business and we don't realize we have a love for it or passion for it until we get in it. We start waiting tables, we find out in Charleston we can make a lot of money and it pays the bills and all those things. So, it was great. And I think that for me, wine is something that just, it happened. It wasn't a plan. It's just something that I really loved and I was passionate about. So I had been working for distributors. And I remember when you came to me and you said, hey, I'd love for you to work for me and be my wine director, but we're not at the point where I can have that position yet. And it's interesting thinking about where we are now and looking back then, because we talk a lot right now about writing our own story. And, the stipulation was, hey, I want you to come to work for me, but I need you to go back to bartending and serving. And I had been in a position where I was salaried, I was making good money, I had benefits, all those things. So it was a step back in one sense, and you just kind of have to have faith and realize that you're going to move forward and grow into something bigger. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, it did work. And so it's paid off. And so I think that it's just one of those things where you kind of take a leap of faith and you say, all right, this is the direction I want to go in. And this is where I am now.
And Jennifer, you did not come down a hospital. So fun fact, I'll get to that in a minute, but
I love these fun facts.
I've got fun facts. They've got more than fun facts on me, but we'll keep this somewhat civilized. We worked together in another company before I started the Indigo Road.
Yes.
And I called you and said, I'm going to start this company. It was 2009, the depth of the recession. And I said, I'm going to start this company. We're going to open restaurants. We're going to do all these things. And what was your response?
You're crazy. I remember looking at my parents going, this man's crazy.
I actually remember you said, I'll take the job, but I'm going to continue to look for other jobs.
Well, because it was a step back for me as well, because it was just the one we had two, but one was about to open and just wasn't the same money. And I was like, I got to keep looking. He was like, that's fine. And in the meantime, he went and found me other jobs so that I could supplement my income to continue working for him. And then eventually, way down the road, he was like, hey, you're going to have to stop doing those little side projects because we're busy over here. I need your focus over here. So
it was like almost like your start in the company was almost a side project because you were still looking for something.
in my mind, yes.
Totally.
Well,
Yeah.
and plus,
It was the worst offer I could possibly have. I have no security. I got a wing and a prayer, and we're not making any money. So, okay, great.
She was a new mom. She just had a baby who is now
15,
15.
almost 16.
Yeah,
16
think about
in
that.
May. Yes,
Wow.
he was a little baby.
Yeah.
But Steve, you had the vision early on,
We
right?
did.
So especially in,
I mean, I knew I had written out in a journal like what we've done. So, I mean, did I have belief in myself? Not necessarily, but dreaming big has never been a problem, whether that's
Right.
good or bad, but yeah, I mean, I knew I didn't know the depths and the texture and the layers that we would create, obviously. And I mean more like the soul of the company, the culture, the values. But I knew it was possible.
Yeah, I remember when you called me, I looked at my parents and said restaurants, and they were like, "Oh, that's scary. No, nobody's doing restaurants right now."
Right. It's terrible. So I'm gonna ask you the same question, but I guess it's different because if I say why hospitality, you'll say, well, it wasn't hospitality.
Mhm.
But now that you're in it, would you want to do accounting for?
Oh no, definitely not. And I think that's why I stuck around, because I had been in hotels, and it's numbers, and I like numbers, but you just didn't have. It was the people. The people are so different in restaurants, and we've said that since we started the lodging division, that restaurant people and lodging people are just different, and the restaurant people are just fun. I always get to hear fun stories.
Yeah, I mean, I remember those early days when our company Christmas parties.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
we
boy.
get Jenny out, and then we'd have to throw her in the cab.
Yeah.
We get home, okay?
Bye-bye. We are the island of misfit toys.
We are.
And I feel like I'm the mayor sometimes.
And I never really fit in corporate anyway. Like, there was a complaint that I was typing too loud back in my 20s. And I was like, I'm working. Like, how is that possible that I'm typing too loud? So I
would
feel
have
like,
never made it in corporate.
No, I didn't make
Never.
it long.
Same.
It did fit. It fit me. It fit, like the blue jeans and it was more casual.
Right.
And you were always like, get your job done. So that's how it worked. It was great. And freedom. And
I love it. Mr. Bacon, why'd you want to cook? I don't think I've ever even heard this, but why? I mean, you're a local guy. You were going down the stock market path. Didn't you
Yeah.
do an internship at Merrill Lynch?
Yeah.
Or you
Dealer.
worked at Merrill Lynch?
Yeah, I worked there for 3 years. I had always, come from a family where my mother and my grandmother were great cooks. It really kicked in for me in high school when I ate a lot as a teenager. And I was like, I need to get in. That was my interest. It was like, how do I cook? I want to be able to cook. And, because we would go out shrimping, we would go out crabbing. So that kind of sparked it for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you became a professional cook, how is that different than what you imagined it in the beginning?
I think it aligned. It's kind of funny. I think back to what was it, the spinoff of Three's Company when Jack Ritter he was the chef and he would surf in the morning and cook at night. And I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do. So I can still surf.
Right.
So it kind of was. It seemed to match.
I love the Three's Company reference.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
good
I forgot
stuff,
he
man.
was-
I
you
mean,
was a chef.
you're
Yeah,
telling our
right.
age. though.
Yeah,
That's
we are
okay.
telling our age.
I was like,
Thanks,
this guy's
Jeremiah.
doing it. He's surfing and he's working. He's a respectable citizen. So, but yeah, I mean, I didn't really have a lot to go on as far as where to sort of, if I was doing the right thing. So, a big part of it was getting up to New York and getting to Culinary Institute and kind of help set the path where I wanted to be. And I had never really left Charleston. So being out of Charleston was, when I left, I was like, I'm never coming back to Charleston ever. So, 11
It
years
sucks
later.
you back in.
For me, it was one of those things where leaving was just as important as coming back. So it was kind of, I would think after about 5 years of being gone, I'll say, you know what, I'm going to never say never. Maybe, we'll see what happens. So I'm trying to be an adult.
That's when you and I met, when you returned to Charleston.
Carolinas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
was it Carolinas?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I worked there a couple of years. That was even,
You had to keep your eye on me. I remember. I was like, why
Full-time
is he always
job.
on my back?
We're still keeping our eyes on Kimball.
That has not changed.
So I ask this question on every episode. So I'll start with you, Jennifer. What does hospitality mean to you?
Oh, it means like a family, warm and caring. And, I can remember back when I started with you and we had like one of our first leadership things and you're like, okay, you're coming to this. And I was like, oh, this doesn't really apply to me, this hospitality stuff. Like I'm accounting, I'm in the numbers. And you're like, no, it's how we treat our people. Like you have to come and like be a part of this. And it really shapes how we run our business. And, I don't think that was never a part of where I came from before as far as accounting went. So it was just eye-opening. And so it's how we treat our people.
Vonda, how about you?
I think that it is, it's making people, like you said, it's the warmth, but it's making people feel comfortable because, a lot of people, when they come into a nice dining establishment, fine dining, if you will, a lot of times they're not comfortable with that. And, they may come in and they look at the wine list and they don't really understand anything on it. They read the food menu and say, I don't really understand any of this. And you never want to make someone feel like they are not intelligent or not in the know. And so you just always want to make people feel like no matter what the surroundings, the circumstance they're in, that they're welcome and you're glad they're there. And really try to just, again, make them feel comfortable and make sure they have a fantastic experience, no matter what their level of knowledge is or what your level of knowledge is. You can always kind of meet them somewhere in the middle and just, and make a special occasion for them. I think that's what it's about.
Jeremiah, how about you?
Yeah, I think it's just being genuine and making people feel good and feel welcome. If you don't enjoy making people happy, it's a wrong fit, this business. You can tell when people enjoy it. It's like I was thinking about this the other day. I was talking with it was a bartender years ago who was a little grumpy. And we were having a conversation. He's like, I just don't enjoy, talking to people. And, so you are in the wrong business. This is the opposite of what we do. But it, that's one thing about Gramercy Tavern. You go in and it's just genuinely everyone wants you to have a good time and feel welcome. Yeah. And man, when they hit on all cylinders like that, that's something to strive towards.
Kimball?
It's it was one of our like leadership retreats or conferences meetings that we had years ago. And you posed the question to all of us, like something like that, like hospitality, put it in your own words or whatever. And I was really thinking about it, and there's all the things that build into what makes great hospitality, like being nice, comfort, warm, all that. But for me, I think it's like, for me personally, it's transforming my communication so that someone feels comfortable to communicate back to me, because everyone's so different. Right. And like, there's, people have different, social statuses and different manners, whatever it is. But I think it's really just who I'm communicating with. It's what I'm doing to make them feel more comfortable. And it's different every time because everyone's so different, So it's like whatever I can do to make them feel comfortable to communicate with me. So I guess in our industry, it's internal hospitality with our own teams. It's our guests. But at the end of the day, beautiful restaurants, great food, but communication is how we, give and take the hospitality. So for me, it's always, how do I get this person to kind of let their guard down, so to speak?
I can remember it was that first, not the first retreat, but we did it at Fish upstairs. It was 2014, I think is when you were referring to. And we had opened Macintosh, we had opened Indigo, and it was all working. And I was like, holy crap. And honestly, and y'all have all heard me talk about this, imposter syndrome is a big thing for me. Like I still feel like I'm going to fail or screw all this up every day. But we went around the room, and Jacob Huter was in the room, and that, and there was a lot of old school people there, but
Oh my God.
I kept asking, why is this working? And I would say, do we think we're better marketers, or we spent more money building out the restaurants? No. It's our people. And then we said, well, what is it about our people? And that was the first time I kind of remembered like really getting to the core. We developed our interview questions out of that time. That was 10 years ago, by the way.
Wow.
But
it was like you had this feeling, and you're like, how do we capture what
How
we're
do you
doing?
articulate
like
the
kind of like
feeling?
the magic that we're whatever we're doing to be successful. It's like,
Right.
how do we put that into words so we can teach more of it and embrace more of it?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was like the turning point of like the company growth and creating the core values. And
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
Having something we could all speak to and point at, especially when you veer off course, you need that. I was so afraid that, all that felt so corporate, but it really is, if you're going to be a values-based company, you have to have those things that you can all agree on and that you all can talk about.
Yeah.
Well, the cool thing about that was it's like, I remember that. And you kind of like, it was a collective thing.
Always.
You kind of were like giving people a platform and everyone's chiming in. And then like, as a group, we created the values of the company. It wasn't just like, here's what we're going to do. It was like, we're all like, well, this, and this is, it was special time.
I think that a lot of what we've done over the years is, we were never like laser focused. You were never laser focused. So this is exactly how the path is going to be.
Yeah.
I think that we all
I'm
knew,
still not.
right? I think we all knew, who we were, what we wanted. We talk about integrity a lot, and that is a very big thing for me. If I don't do anything else, I try to act with integrity, and everything else I probably screw up at. But I really think that along the way, we stayed true to what we thought was right and what we wanted our mission to be. And people oftentimes didn't agree with what we were doing, and they still don't, and that's fine. And I think that is one thing that we've done well, is that we know who we are, we know what we want, and yes, people are going to have to say what they want to say, but at the end of the day, if you're true to your vision as to where you want things to be, to where your heart is, then there is no right or wrong. And we are not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But I do feel that, looking back over the past 15 years, we have done remarkable things. We have screwed up many, many times, and we will continue to do that. But I think that is where we've grown as a company. And I think that that's where the relationship, when you look at all of us, and there's many more of us out there that have been with the company. We're just the OGs. We've, been with the company 15, almost 16 years. And, we try to do the best thing that we can for our company and for our people at all times. And I've had so many people. We hired someone a few years ago that came in, and she said, I just thought all that stuff that y'all spouted was a bunch of BS. And she said, but you really do care about each other. You really do love each other. And I'm going to bring this up because you're not reading the questions, but that were on the sheet. But, one of the things was, how are things different now than they were before?
Oh, I was going to ask that, but go ahead.
No, go ahead, Palmer.
No. I was going to ask it differently. Yeah.
No,
go ahead, Vonda.
But I was thinking about that earlier, and I thought, there are so many things. Clearly, we're different. We're bigger. But one thing that I do hate is that we don't see each other as much as we used to. We don't connect as much as we used to. However, when we do connect, it is so authentic. It's so genuine. Kimball called me yesterday for no other reason than to say, how are you? We never lead in with, I need something from you. It's, how are you? And I think that there's something really special about that, because it is a family, and we love each other. We genuinely care about each other. If we did not have that, I don't think we would be at the level that we're at.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, I think, Kimball, what you're talking about is being collaborative, right? And I never wanted this to be the Steve Palmer show. I still don't. And I think true leadership comes from wanting to serve other people, right? And I am grateful. A lot of what I do well is a gift. And I mean that like sincerely, like it's not, I think like a lot of what you do is a skill that you continue to hone. But a lot of what I do is just, it makes sense to me that if you're going to lead people, then you ought to take care of them. Like I didn't, that wasn't a concept I had to read a book on, although I've read a lot of books on it. And I get asked all the time. I got asked this morning, what's the 5-year plan? I have no idea.
Like the 5-minute plan.
Yeah, the 5-minute plan.
Yeah.
But the comfort in it for me is having you here, and you here, and you here, and you here, and so many other people. Because, you know, we know that growth in the independent restaurant world can be a negative thing, right? There can always be this, oh, well, how could the quality be as good as it used to be because all they care about is growing and all that. The reward is our relationships. And you hit the nail on the head, though. The biggest downside for me in growing is I'm not working on a floor. So I don't get that guest interaction, and I don't get to see y'all as much. But I think that speaks, Vonda, even louder to the trust that you have to build in a company if you're going to do what we've done. You have to build trust even if you have one team. You've got to have trust. But we trust each other. We don't always agree with each other. We get frustrated with each other, but we trust each other. And that's
you have to.
That's the most important thing.
A lot of times it'll come up in the conversation if I'm talking with chefs, especially they're just coming on board with us, is the culture. And, you know, we don't hit it on the head 1,000%.
No,
we don't.
We never do.
Perfect. But when we don't, we have conversations about it. And we say, how do we miss the mark? How do we not miss the mark next time? And that's not a lot of, there's a lot of companies out there that don't do that, that don't ask those questions. And, you know, I think we're really good at keeping that in our conversation throughout the week. You know, we're talking about it daily. And when you talk about it, it becomes part of who you are, and then you live it. And that's pretty cool.
I think one of the most powerful things that anybody in a leadership position can do is admit when they miss. Because everybody around you sees it. And that's not why you should do it, because you're a person of character and that's the right thing to do. Yeah. But I'm always you see leaders that lead from a place of insecurity. And so admitting something is wrong is like this frightening thing. And it's unfortunate because it manifests as defensive-ness. So then nobody wants to talk to you. When the truth is the person is insecure. So you know, to me, like, look somebody in the eyes and say, I didn't get that right, and I'm sorry. I've had to apologize to you many times. And we've all had to apologize to each other. But that's just that to me is like being a real human. We don't get it right, but we get it right more than we don't. And I feel like I can say this confidently as the company gets older, I feel like we get better. I mean, our employee satisfaction reviews, we do anonymous surveys every year where we allow the employees to evaluate us. And I think this is one of the most important things we do. And they were the best they've ever been this year, which awesome. Which was really great. And that tells me we're getting better. Jennifer, what part of this job that has been like really satisfying for you has been surprising?
I would say the growth for my team internally, because, you know, it was me for a long time.
Yes, it was.
And then it was a couple people, and now there's like 17 people or something that like either indirectly or directly report to me at the home office. And I think one of the things that surprised me was that I could actually be a good leader, because I've never led really, you know? So that was it. But it's always been so important to me that people want to come to work and that they don't dread it. I had a couple of places where I just didn't want to go to work. And that's like the worst feeling when on a Sunday night. And you'll still get the Sunday scaries, but not wanting to come to work was awful. So I just hope that, you know, they enjoy their time when they're there and they're having a good time as much as you can in an office setting.
What does it mean to you to have 17 people that report to you?
I mean, it's just kind of crazy. I try not to think about it too much.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's interesting for sure, but I feel like the growth has been intentional, and where it was more scary in the beginning because we didn't have as many restaurants to cover the expenses. Now it's, we're adding something, we can add people. It feels better.
Well, it's kind of like you went from being the star quarterback to then the head coach.
Yes.
Which is definitely a transition,
it is a transition.
For a lot of people. Yeah.
A lot of delegation.
I like that.
Yes.
I like that.
I like that I was a star quarterback too.
Yes, you were. Yes, you were. Just running with the money bag.
I wish.
You will always be the star quarterback.
Yeah. It's funny though you said that, because I just going back to what you said about the mistakes, right? Because I was just interviewing a potential chef today, and I got a little bit of the sense that they were, like, I can do this, and I was like, listen, man, to be successful in our company, you don't have to be the best cook in the restaurant. You have to, and I talked about that. I was like, you are more human to your teams when you can say, hey, I screwed that up. Because when you do make the mistake and you're trying to shift the blame, everyone watching knows what happened, and they're all like, that guy's full of it.
I can't trust him.
Yeah. And so I was like, this is how you build trust. You make the mistakes and you own it. And then people are like, we like this guy or this, this person. So yeah, it's crazy. It just goes back to the communication side and how important that is. And
so Kimball, you are somebody that has grown a concept. And it's interesting. I've thought about this lately when, like, Jeremiah and I are the same age. We're the old guys in the room. There were a lot less restaurant groups when we were coming up. And if they were one or two. Now you see, Boca Group, Sam Fox Restaurant Group, of course, Union Square Hospitality Group. So groups are becoming more commonplace. What do you think? As you look at somebody that's taken 1 to 10 in a bunch of different states, which is worth noting because we're not all in New York City or we're not all in Chicago. We're kind of all over the Southeast. What's been some of the lessons learned on that? Because I think that a lot of people on the outside see the growth and it's very romantic and it just looks like we're just popping them out. But we all know, everybody sitting here knows how much.
It's not romantic.
No, it's nerve-wracking sometimes. It's definitely rewarding and it's something to be proud of. But it's definitely I can't even speak to that question because it's such a team effort. If I was to go out like some of our former colleagues have done and do it on their own, it would be a huge learning curve because there's certain things that, Jennifer and her team cover. There's certain things that Vonda and her team cover that I don't touch. I've made a point to learn a lot of these things along the way, but when it comes to setting up whatever it is, the legal side, I wouldn't know where to start, to be quite honest. So it's such a collaborative thing, what was the question?
Yeah.
It's rewarding.
No,
it's scary.
No, it's okay. That's what I love about this format. Is we can just be real. What do you think let me ask it a different way. What are the things you think you've done really well in growing Oku that either you learned about yourself after the fact, like you look back and went, oh wow, I see a common thread through all 10 of the restaurants.
Yeah.
And what have been the things you find most challenging?
I think keeping the spirit of the company values alive is one of the most important things that I think I've done well, as far as just keeping a dialogue with all the teams. And that's difficult at 10 restaurants, knowing the dishwashers' names and every employee and trying to have some sort of a common ground when I come into the restaurant. Because I don't want to ever be, making the rounds and be that person that's unfamiliar, that people are nervous about being around. I like to think that I bring like maybe a good spirit, or if things have been challenging, that a visit to that restaurant and spending time there is going to uplift people. So I think that's something that I've worked on and try to really perfect, my approach with people when I'm, checking in on all the locations. And I think the most challenging part would probably be just maintaining that, so it's the value of it. And then it's also hard to do that, especially when, it's a business of people. So, we lose people, people come and go. And, I think trying to maintain what we have is the most challenging thing, but can also be the most rewarding part too. So
Loyalty. You guys have heard me talk about that. It's a harder thing to do today.
yeah.
It feels like sometimes it can be one-sided, and there's an expectation of loyalty, but it's not given. It's kind of like, when somebody says, well, how can I trust them if they don't trust me? And it's this vicious cycle. And I feel like you, better than most in this company, attract loyalty. People like working with you. It's hard. Jennifer, what's the biggest I mean, all of the media, even right now, it seems like there's a real season of restaurants closing, more so than after COVID, to be honest. I feel like right now, like, you are looking at P&Ls every day. What's the most challenging thing you see in the way people operate a restaurant?
I think the labor is the most challenging thing. I feel like people used to work more.
Yeah.
I mean, when I came up, you were expected to work your job had to be done. So you worked late at night, and then on Saturdays for month end, you were there. And that's just not what we do now. Our month end lasts longer, even in our department. I just don't think people want to work the way that we did. And so that you have to hire more people. I mean, and that's not, it's not necessarily a negative thing, I guess, but I don't know. I just always wanted to get somewhere in my career. So I was like, I'm going to put in the hours. I'm going to work hard because I always wanted to move up.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see that quite as much anymore. I mean, there are people that do, of course, but
It's almost like more often people are like wanting to take a step back.
right.
Yeah. Which
or skip over 10 steps to get to,
Right.
I want to be Steve Palmer.
I'm going to start my career
I don't want to be
today.
Steve Palmer. I don't want to be Steve Palmer.
Nobody wants
people do that. They're like, I want Jennifer Dailey's job. And you're like, well, you just started in accounting like 2 weeks ago.
Right. It is interesting.
Right.
The kid,
Right.
the people out of college, the expectation is like, where's the next step? And it's like, well, you got to put your time in for a little bit at least. And there are some, really smart people out there that they do advance a little bit faster, but there is something about time.
I mean, that's I was the GM of Oku for 5 years.
Yeah.
And I was content. And I was like, I think I knew that there needed to be something later, but I wasn't like, Steve, what's next for me? I think I was enjoying the job a lot.
Yeah,
I was caught up in that. But I think people, it's you don't really see that a GM. I mean, there's rare occurrences, but like to have a general manager in our company for 5 years, it's like,
you don't ever see that anymore.
Yeah.
Were you surprised, Jennifer, as someone that came from hotels?
Mm-hmm.
And I this is not a criticism of our brothers and sisters. It's more a criticism of the last generation of ownership not mentoring our brothers and sisters. Were you surprised at people, executive chefs, general managers that didn't understand financial P&Ls?
Oh, yeah. I think that there was an expectation like the GM was just going to do it, and that the exec chef kind of didn't have to know the numbers. And that was the difference for our company. It's like, oh no, you do need to be involved in these. And there's some companies that don't require that. They're like, here's your dollars, run with it. They got it. But now the margins are so different.
They're so different
That you have to manage at a higher level, and you really need that understanding. So that's what, we try to teach people these things.
I just love that we don't hide anything financially. There's so many restaurants where the GMs and the chefs, they don't really know how they did
Mm-hmm.
or what happened. Whereas we see every single expense, it's
financial transparency is so important. And I have other operators that disagree with me on this, by the way, adamantly disagree. Yeah, I was surprised. Less so now, I'm not surprised, but when we would hire a GM and they had no idea what a P&L looked like.
Well, that seems to be part of the old school management system.
Right.
Right. I mean, you think about it, it was just the chef, the GM, and the owner, and they kind of kept everything, close to their chest. So that was one thing I always enjoyed about the Indigo Road is like we communicate about everything. There's plenty of room for movement and growth. And you just didn't see it as much back in the day. The same thing with the culture. The culture was kind of, we've been in the old school culture that's, there's plenty of unhealthy things about that. So how do we transform that? How do we update that as well? So
I think that, when we talk about culture, and clearly we talk about culture a lot. And I've got to be honest, I don't know that I ever understood what that meant until I worked with Indigo Road. I had worked, much to your point, in old school restaurants where I've seen chefs throw chef knives across the kitchen and they stuck in the side of the walk-in, where you get yelled at, humiliated. It was terrifying. I mean, literally you went to work, when you got home, you're like, I survived. and you thought, that was your biggest goal, is just to get through the night and get your money and get home. And really and truly, I think, especially with Jeremiah, and I'll kind of, say kudos to you, when you came on as the chef at Oak, you have a very calm way about you, a very understanding way about you, and you want to explain things to people. And I had never experienced that. I had never seen anything like that. And I think it was interesting because at that same time, and we were clearly not the only restaurant group that was part of that movement, but we kind of got out of that really negative, nasty culture and that world of the restaurant world. I mean, you lived in it. I lived in it. Anyone that worked in a restaurant pre-whatever, 2000 lived in that. And so it's really been great to see. And I love that we are, again, part of that, but it has been a part of the restaurant industry as a whole changing. And it's a world built on, it's always been about a family. Sometimes, like you said, the island of the misfits, I think, in the past, but now it's really coming together and creating a safe environment, an environment that people love to come to work. Like you said, that it's not somewhere where you feel like you're going to be belittled. And there's something special about that, because I think the industry as a whole is very, very different. And I know my experience in the industry with a solid, strong culture started with Indigo Road. It did, and it's still there. So I think that's one thing that people gravitate to the company. When they see that, again, they think, are they really walking the talk? And again, we don't always get it right, but most of the time we do. And they come in and we embrace them. And so it's been really fun to see how big we've grown and in such a positive way for this industry.
You're seeing how the core values came out of that, that goal of having a constructive environment.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of the core values that are still the same as they were 10, 12 years ago. And we just added one this year, so we're still kind of polishing them, but it was a pretty solid foundation.
I want to go back to you because you said something I think is important. Although no one wants to be me, but you on the outside, and I say this because I know what it takes to do your job. I mean, you're the wine buyer for 30 businesses, more.
But do you really?
You get to travel all over the world. I'm saying this for the benefit of people that might be watching it. What does it take to be you?
Oh my goodness. Wow. I think that.
Do you get to drink wine all day long? Is that what
I used to?
Yeah.
And it was amazing. I loved it. I want to do that again. No, I'm kidding. I think that it's been an interesting journey for me because one of the questions that, they kind of said that may come up is, how did running the program at Oak Steakhouse prep you for, we obviously have more concepts now than just Oak Steakhouse. Good. And I think luckily for me, a steakhouse is obviously, you kind of dip into every region in the entire world. So you get a little bit of an understanding of each one of them. And, but then when it came to the point where you said, well, I want you to take over Oku. And I was like, okay, I knew nothing about sake, nothing. I had no idea. So what did I do? I went we were talking about this earlier, and I started, researching and buying books. And this was probably even before Google was even Google. Okay. So you had to buy books, and that's what you had to do to try to learn things. And then I remember when you came to me and said, we're going to open up an Italian concept in Charleston. I think it needs to be all Italian. I said, I completely agree with you. And I went home and I was like, I know nothing. I know like this much about Italian. So for me, the journey as far as growth it's been fun. It's been stressful because I don't ever want anyone to feel like I don't know something. But I've gained a confidence in being able to say I don't know everything. And I think that is what people miss sometimes is they look at me and they say, well, she knows what she's doing. Most of the time I try to, but a lot of times I have no clue what I'm doing.
Right.
And I'm comfortable now to say that. And I'm comfortable now to look at you and say, I need help in this area. Much like Kimball, you were talking about earlier, Kimball's not great with numbers. Okay. He's gotten better over the years. And I think that, and I'm not exactly addressing your question, but it is being able to look at yourself, and we say this, and recognize your weaknesses as not a bad thing. It's just, that's an area that I need help. And so I think that, my job now, it's very different than what it was 15 years ago. It's incredibly different. We have to be profitable. We do. So that is a lot of what I do. There is so much more wine in the world, and now I'm over spirits and over beer, and it's incredibly overwhelming. And I think that, again, I continue to go back to the point is you stay focused on who we are, who we want to be, and you can't worry about what everyone else thinks about you and what they say and what everyone else is doing. I've said it 1,000 times. I'm not the coolest kid on the block when it comes to a wine program, but I feel confident that what I'm doing is creating a solid wine program. And they're always evolving. And that's the cool thing about my job. I don't really have to get it right because I can change it pretty easily. So I think that's kind of a fun thing. It's the growth, it's the learning, and it's knowing, hey, this didn't work. Let's try something different, and being okay with that and not feeling like you failed. You're growing. You're not failing.
So my follow-up to that for you specifically, as someone that's in charge of a multi-million-dollar business, as a woman, has that been different for you than you think it might have been for a male?
Yes.
Because in the beginning of my career, the wine industry was
Predominantly
male dominated. How is that as a strong woman? And that's one of the things I love, is that I'm constantly surrounded by strong women.
Unless you don't agree with us.
Well, if I don't agree, then you usually tell me I'm wrong. And then Jennifer always tells me I'm wrong. But how has that been different for you as a woman in wine?
I think it's been difficult. I think that as much as we say things are changing, there is still a level of where, as women, it takes longer to prove yourself than if you're a man. It still exists. And that's okay. I think that it makes women stronger, to be honest with you, because I think that you have to fight a little bit harder, prove yourself a little bit more, to gain the respect. And I think, like you said, strong women, I don't mind that challenge. I have no problem with that at all. And I'll continue to push because I know who I am. I know what I do. And to your point, yes, in the beverage industry, it was male dominated when I first came on. And it's not a fun spot to be in, especially when you're younger and you're a female and you're surrounded by all these older guys that are in the business, have been in the business forever. But I will say it's switched now. It's completely switched. If I had to look through my phone list, which I won't do right now because it'd take all day, but there's more women in those roles. And I'm not saying they're doing it better. I'm saying they're doing it differently. And I think that, as a woman in this business, you have to, again, I go back to, you have to be confident in that what you're doing is the right thing and not let anyone make you feel like it's wrong. Doesn't mean that you can't be wrong, but you have to have a very clear focus as to who you are, what we want as a company, and be confident in that and not worry about what everybody else is saying, because there's always going to be somebody out there coming in. I have people now coming in I meet with, and I say, this wine is just, it's not really working for our program. I'm not saying it's a bad wine. They're like, well, you're wrong. And I'm like, okay, well, I could be, but I'm still sticking to my guns. This is where I am. So I think it's just being confident. And it is. It's still tough to be a female in the industry. I mean, Jennifer, I know that, you're a lot of the higher ups and a lot of the partners that you deal with, they're male. But you're the one delivering the news and you know the numbers. And sometimes they may not agree, but you have to be steadfast in knowing that what you're saying is the truth and is right.
Sure.
I was going to come over to you.
So go, Jenny.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it was difficult coming up because if you challenge somebody, you were seen as, a certain word. But if you're a man and you're being more assertive and challenging, you're not called, that. You're just a strong man. But as a female, you get a certain title for that. And
you're a bitch.
Yeah, that's the word.
Yeah.
And I always thought that was unfair because I'm like, no, I'm just strong in my beliefs and my opinions and my work. And I don't think I'm a bitch, but
you had conviction.
I had conviction. And even though I grew up in a small town, I was never told that I couldn't do it because I was a female. And I feel like we were all just, I never felt like I couldn't do it. And it wasn't until you got into corporate America that you were like, oh, there is literally a glass ceiling that you had to get through. And thankful to Steve Palmer for giving me that opportunity because.
Well, you earned it. You earned it 100%. Kimball, and I'm going to ask Jeremiah this after you. 15 years, our industry has changed. And I don't even mean like what people like to eat, but like every single aspect of our industry, how we treat each other, the economics, the amount of people that go out to dinner. There was no Instagram 15 years ago. There was no Top Chef. There were no foodies. There were no influencers. How has it for you? How has the industry changed for you? And what do you like about it? And what do you not like about it?
Well, it's a way more humane industry now. It's become way more mainstream. I think it's a more respected industry, it's more, I think, regarded in a higher sense. I think it's an industry that people are now gravitating to. It's always been that like kind of transient, in the meantime. And I just, we see a lot more career people jumping into our industry. There's a lot more flexibility. I think that is a definite positive to the way the industry's changed. I think it's all positives, really. It's more challenging, obviously, as we were talking about cost of goods and the labor pool, the labor cost is definitely changed. And I think that's going to be an ongoing challenge. But I would probably just stick to the fact that it's a more humane industry, kind of like what you were talking about, like trying to survive a shift. And even though I think I thrived in that environment, but I also realized that was not a humane environment, for people to treat each other a certain way. And it was totally okay. You could say something really horrible to somebody and it would just get brushed under the rug and we'd all be back tomorrow. And it made it seem like it was acceptable. And I will say, at least in our community here in Charleston, I think our company has helped kind of usher a change in a lot of ways. And we had to learn those lessons along the way too, whether it be, not being compliant with something and learning the hard way, or just understanding that this is a more successful way to approach people in the business. So, I think it's changed for the better. And I think we've been a nice part of that too.
Jeremiah, and specifically about being a chef, because that I think has probably changed the most. And by that, expectations of kids coming out of culinary school, like just the whole idea of being a chef. How do you think that's different in the last 15 years, good and bad?
I think better. I think we went through a period probably 5 or 6 years ago where it was that big awareness that this is not what people told me or what the schools told me. I can remember 2000, right when we started the Macintosh, we were first starting to hear the millennial kind of term. And it's like, well, the problem, the solution is don't hire millennials. I think, no, it's like, it's like, well, the millennial workforce is going to be our workforce.
Now it's the Gen Z workforce.
Yeah. So it's up to us to sort of build around this, incorporate what they want, what they need. Because if we don't change, we're going to be left at the back door. I think being in a college town helps, kind of give us a little bit more insight to what's coming down the pipeline. We've got, I tell you one thing here at Oak, we get a lot of folks that start when they're freshman year and they stay until they're seniors. That's just incredible.
Yeah.
And, a lot of times when they're getting ready to graduate, they'll come up kind of nervous, chef. I don't know if I want this. I'm going to go to be an accountant or law school, or I'm going to do this. And that's like, no problem. They're worried that, they're going to, I don't know, they let me down, that they're not staying in the food and beverage. So that's been a big, listening to that generation. I think it's been a big insight of where we need to be and where we need to go. Some of the things haven't changed. I mean, it's a physical job, and you need to be passionate about it.
Right.
I mean, you're passionate about anything, whether it's numbers, wine. You're gonna find success in that field.
That's a big thing that's changed. Drugs and alcohol. The business has cleaned up quite a bit. I mean, obviously, people have their habits, but the shift drink at the end of the night at the bar you were working at, hours before or whatever, that's been something that's really made our industry a lot more professional. There's a lot less, there's a lot less blurry. Yeah. It was like, well, do they pay for the drink or do we give it was so different back then, whatever it was, the late night hangouts when we'd lock the doors and pull the curtains.
And when we kind of,
but Steve would roll in with a cigar and be like, "What's going on here?" I was like, "What a different company we are."
Yeah, we grew up. When he said millennials was the generation, and now we're to Gen Z, I was like, we really have gotten old.
It's funny,
Yeah.
Gen Z is less alcohol consumption and they're anti-cigarette smoke. It's like it's very, very different now.
2 final questions that I'll scatter around the room. Kimball, what are you most afraid of?
Man, a lot of things, I think keeping up, I think staying physically healthy, because, it's still a physically demanding industry, 100%. And I think just, staying strong and healthy so I can still do all the things that we need to do, because I don't want to phase out. I want to continue to travel and work the floor and stay active. And so I think just keeping pace is what worries me the most, but it's exciting that we're growing and I'm all for the growth. And but I think just, keeping up in general, not even necessarily the growth of our company, but just I want to stay doing what I'm doing for a long time. So,
Jennifer?
I agree. I always saw this as like, this is my career and this is where I would like to retire from. So that's always like what I'm thinking is, staying, but also learning, not being stagnant, which we do so much that there's new all, just around the corner. So you can learn something new every day. But just being able to stick with it. And I always thought it was like, I would have to change careers because restaurants were like younger. But I think as Steve has gotten older and we've gotten older, I can see a path more where maybe this can be, I can stick with it. Steve's sticking with it. Bacon's sticking with it.
I'm in it. Nobody else will have me. Vonda, what is your hope for our industry?
Wow. I think for me, coming from the beverage end of it, we've definitely seen a bit of a shift away in the past, 15 or 20 years. Where it used to, there was a psalm on pretty much 2 or 3 psalms in Charleston, especially at every single, high-end restaurant. There was such an interest in wine. there was such an interest in beverage in general. And I feel like we saw, I would say really up until about a year ago, where people just, they weren't really interested in it, or maybe they weren't interested in wine, but they were interested in craft beer, or maybe they were interested in cocktails. And so I think that the industry, as far as the beverage end, has kind of been spread out. And I hope to see people kind of gravitate back to really wanting to learn about the whys of things, like why wine goes great with food, why we focus so much on wine with the restaurant group, why about cocktails, why about beer, because I think that it has become just something that's part of their process, their evening, their sales. That's just kind of something. Well, somebody's just going to order a bottle of wine. If somebody walks into Oak Steakhouse, they're going to order a bottle of wine. I would like to see it get back to where it shifts back to where people really want to sell and they really want to focus on it, because I think we've gotten away from that. And I do think that a lot of it, like Kimball said, a lot of people aren't drinking as much anymore. And that doesn't mean that they can't really enjoy things, because obviously our NA Bev program is grown. It will continue to grow, because I think it's a very important part of the beverage program as a whole. But I think that, we talk about curious intelligence, people wanting to know about wine regions and wines and why this is like this and why this tastes like that. I do feel like we've seen people kind of back off on that in the past few years, but in the past year, I've seen, thank goodness, I was not hopeful there for a while, but I do see people starting to gravitate back. We even have a lot of, I say kids, because they're young enough to be my kid now, which is crazy to me. They're coming up and they're taking an interest and they're saying, I want to be part of the beverage program. I want to learn more about wine. So I think that there's a glimmer of hope there that is turning back a little bit, that people they want to learn. They want to do those things and study and grow like we did years ago. And they're doing it of their own choice and not because we're telling them they have to. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yeah.
Jeremiah, take us home. What's your hope for culinarians, for the industry?
Well, I think we're seeing a lot of it with big shifts and changes with drugs, alcohol. It's people getting into work-life balance, mental health. I mean, things like Ben's Friends is just how it's just touched lives. That's helping legitimize more things about our industry, and that's pretty cool to see. Because I mean, you think back to the 25 years ago, no one had time for any of that. So I think that's because at the end of the day, we're a people business. That's not going anywhere. We're the same.
The robots are not coming for our jobs.
Maybe one or two. Maybe one or two. But at the end of the day, it's people taking care of people. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Steve, I got a question for you.
Oh boy.
We share in this desire. One of the reasons I fell in love with the business was fine dining, right? I mean, the guests dressing to the nines and the elegance at the front door, the tablecloths, we saw a lot of that stuff get removed. And do you think fine dining as we knew it in the 90s and early 2000s, when your career was starting, do you think that will have a resurge? Like, is that going to come back? Because
I think it is back. It looks a little different. So think about the rise in omakase. Well, that was fine dining tasting menus. If you look at interior design, and I'll talk about, this is really resonating with me. You're seeing a lot more grandeur in the design of a restaurant now. I think it is back. I think the stuffiness is not. And I'm not saying like tasting menu, but I think it's coming back in different ways. But seeing a lot of French restaurants open again in New York. I think in a lot of ways it is back. I think there's an opulence. You're seeing caviar on menus everywhere now.
It's coming back in a different way.
It's coming back in a different way, but I think that exuberance is definitely back. And I think it's exciting. I mean, we're opening new concepts and continuing to open Oaks, which are certainly at the top of the price range. But yeah, I think it's coming back. Well, I want to thank y'all for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. The Indigo Road doesn't exist without y'all and a whole lot of other people. So thank you for your heart and soul. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Say Grace, Food for Thought and Hospitality. If you found this episode inspirational, be sure to share it with your friends, families, and colleagues, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. We hope you'll join us next time as we continue to dive into deeper stories of inspiration about the transformative power of hospitality.